Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
It's great to be here. We have a really fascinating mix of stories today. We're going to cover everything from the global economy of storytelling to, believe it or not, the molecular biology of cashew trees and even dinosaur footprints.
A bit of everything then. We're starting off, as always, with the editorial section. And this first article, The Mineable Self, it really made me pause. It argues we've fundamentally misunderstood what the new oil of our economy actually is.
It's a very provocative thesis, you know. Usually when we talk about the next big resource, our minds go to things like AI or rare earth minerals, maybe data in a very abstract sense.
Right.
But this piece argues that the real primary commodity for global capitalism is sociality. It's us, our friendships, our love lives, our community connections.
And the article really breaks down the mechanism here. It frames it as a major shift in industrial capitalism. I think it's worth unpacking that.
Yeah.
In the classic model, you have Marx talking about extracting surplus value from labor.
Exactly. You work on an assembly line for 8 hours, you get paid for those 8 hours, but the value you create in that time is much more than your wage. The capitalist keeps the difference. That was the old mine.
And the new mine is our personal lives.
The new mine is the surplus value of your personal life. The extraction has literally moved from the factory floor into your living room, into your phone. Every time you post about a vacation, a breakup, a political opinion, you are generating raw material.
You're doing the work of content creation.
You are. But the platform, the capitalist entity, is the one extracting the immense value from that social interaction. The article calls it profiling on steroids, which I think is a pretty apt description.
It is. And what I found really compelling is how this directly connects to what it calls the story market. This isn't just about targeting ads better anymore. It's about feeding this enormous, hungry content machine.
You're talking about the streaming giants.
Yes, Netflix, Amazon, all of them.
And that's where you see the sheer scale of this demand. The article points out that these OTT platforms have a practically infinite appetite for characters. They simply cannot rely on the old Hollywood model of a few big stars. There aren't enough of them, and frankly, they're too expensive.
And they don't resonate everywhere.
Precisely. If you want to get subscribers in India or Brazil or Nigeria, you need local stories. You need what the article calls the unknowns, the extraordinarily ordinary.
There's a quote in there about Reed Hastings from Netflix targeting 100 million Indian subscribers way back in 2018. To do that, you can't just show them Hollywood blockbusters. You need local folklore, local crime stories, local family dramas.
And on the surface, this sounds like democratization. You know, everyone gets a voice, everyone's story is valuable. But the author here argues it's actually something of a trap.
How so?
Because it fundamentally changes how we perceive our own lives. The article makes this really clever pivot from the philosopher Charles Taylor's book, Sources of the Self, to the modern sources of the selfie.
I like that.
It's a great line. And the idea is that the classical individual, this concept of a person with a stable, private, interior identity is dissolving. We're becoming these unstable composites of data points. Our credit score, our social media profiles, our viewing history.
And to feel real in that environment, we have to perform our lives for an audience. We have to turn our experiences into a story.
Yes. That's the crucial shift. We now have this pervasive belief that every self has a story, and that every story, whether it's one of heroism or one of victimhood, deserves an audience. And it's that belief that makes us willingly walk into the mine every day and hand over our privacy.
We are mining ourselves.
We are. And the article concludes with this really chilling thought. Once that privacy is mined, it's gone forever. It renders true intimacy obsolete, because intimacy is no longer a private connection. It's just potential inventory for the global story market.
Wow. That is a heavy thought to start the day on. Let's pivot to a different kind of mining, actual mining. The second editorial is titled India and the Future of the Kimberley Process.
This is a huge deal, a major geopolitical opportunity, really. India has taken over the chairmanship of the Kimberley process, or KP, for 2026.
And for anyone set up back in 2003 to stop the trade of conflict diamonds.
Right. Blood diamonds. The ones used to fund brutal civil wars, particularly in Africa.
And India's position in this whole ecosystem is fascinating. We don't really mine diamonds, not on the scale of, say, Botswana or Russia, but we are the absolute center of the industry. We're the bottleneck.
That is the perfect word for it. Something like 90% of the world's rough diamonds pass through India to be cut and polished. Mostly in Surat and Mumbai, we are the gatekeepers.
So if a diamond wants to end up on a ring in London or Tokyo?
It almost certainly has to come through India first, and that gives us enormous leverage to push for reforms and fix the deep flaws in the current system.
And the flaws are pretty glaring. The article points out that the very definition of a conflict diamond is basically stuck in 2003.
It's incredibly narrow. It only covers diamonds used by rebel groups to fight against internationally recognized governments.
Which leaves out a lot.
It leaves out everything else. It completely ignores violence committed by state actors themselves, by government armies, or by private security firms. It ignores forced labor, child labor, catastrophic environmental damage. Under the current rules, a government could commit terrible human rights abuses to mine diamonds, and those stones would still be certified as conflict-free.
So India has a chance to expand that definition, to modernize it.
A huge chance, and the article lays out a sort of roadmap for how to do it. One of the most interesting proposals is leveraging technology, specifically blockchain.
Okay, so how would that actually work? How does blockchain fix this problem better than the current system?
Well, right now, the KP relies on paper certificates that are supposed to accompany parcels of rough diamonds. But paper can be forged. Officials can be bribed. And once a duddy diamond gets mixed into a huge batch of clean diamonds at a polishing factory, it's physically impossible to tell them apart.
It's laundered, essentially.
It is. Blockchain changes that mechanism entirely. It would create a unique, tamper-proof digital record for every stone, a digital twin. From the moment it's pulled out of the ground, its journey is recorded on an immutable ledger.
So you can trace it from the mine all the way to the market.
Exactly. You can't fake the history of the stone because the record is decentralized and cryptographically secured. If India, as a polishing hub, says, "We will not cut or polish any diamond unless its entire history is on this blockchain," it would force the entire supply chain to comply. It changes the game.
The other big idea in the piece is about inclusivity, moving away from just punishing countries.
Yes, instead of just slapping embargoes on countries that have problems, which often just pushes the trade into the black market, the article argues for a more constructive approach. Capacity building.
So helping them regulate their own trade.
Right. Setting up regional technical hubs in Africa, for instance, to help smaller countries with geological surveys, valuation, and tracking. It's about shifting from a purely punitive model to a developmental one. Viewing diamonds not just as a potential source of conflict, but as a critical source of livelihood for millions, and aligning the industry with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
It's framing it as a chance for India to really lead the global South.
Yeah.
A very different kind of global leadership.
A very different kind, yes.
All right, moving on to the opinion section, we have a piece here called the Erode Blueprint. This takes us down to Tamil Nadu to look at one of the biggest challenges we face, job creation.
And this is a fantastic piece of grounded reporting because it avoids broad generalizations. It zooms in on a very specific case study to explain a massive structural problem. It looks at a mid-sized dairy plant in Erode called Misty Milk.
Misty Milk, great name. And the situation there is a kind of paradox, isn't it?
It really is. Here you have this modern high-tech plant. You have massive, and I mean massive, consumer demand for milk and dairy products. But the plant can't run at full capacity.
Why not?
Because the supply chain is broken. They can't get enough raw milk.
Which seems crazy. If the demand is there and the processing facility is there, you'd think farmers would be lining up to supply the milk. What's the holdup?
And this is the core insight of the entire article. The bottleneck isn't infrastructure, it's not technology, it's not demand, it's credit.
Access to money.
Access to formal credit for the small and marginal farmers. We're talking about the vast majority of farmers who the article says own about 85% of the land holdings. They want to expand. They want to buy one more cow or invest in better quality feed to increase their yield. They can't get the money to do it.
This is that classic missing middle problem in finance, right? They're too small for the big banks.
Exactly. The banks see them as too high risk. They don't have enough collateral, and the banks are constantly worried about non-performing assets, or NPAs. So the farmers are forced to go to informal moneylenders who charge these exorbitant, crippling interest rates.
Which makes expanding too risky anyway, so they're stuck.
Everyone is stuck. The farmers stay small, the Misty Milk plant runs at half capacity, and all those potential jobs in processing, logistics, and retail, They just don't get created. The article contrasts this with the Emul cooperative model.
Which manages to solve this exact problem.
It does, because the cooperative acts as the aggregator and the guarantor. It reduces the risk for the banks and provides the necessary scale.
The stakes here are just enormous. The article links this directly to India's demographic dividend.
It does, and it's a stark reminder. The clock is ticking. We have this incredible window, maybe another 2 decades, where our huge working-age population is a massive advantage. But if we don't fix these fundamental credit bottlenecks for our small and medium enterprises, the SMEs, we'll miss the chance to create mass employment. We risk getting old before we get rich.
A really important warning. Now, staying on the theme of the economy, let's look at the second opinion piece. This one analyzes the RBI's Consumer Confidence Survey from January 2026, and it paints a picture of a divided India.
A tale of two Indias, for sure. There's a really sharp divergence in sentiment between urban and rural consumers.
Okay, so break that down for us. What's the urban story?
Urban India is feeling gloomy. People in the cities are pessimistic about the general economy, about their employment prospects, about rising prices, and as a result, they're becoming more cautious. They're cutting back on discretionary spending.
Tightening their belt.
Exactly. Saving for a rainy day. But when you look at the data from rural India, it's telling a completely different story. They're actually quite upbeat, quite optimistic about the economic situation and future employment.
Okay, but there's a really strange data point in here that I want you to help me understand. The survey says rural consumers are reporting a decrease in their current income levels.
Yes.
Yet, they're reporting an increase in their spending. How does that work?
That is the spending paradox at the heart of this article. Normally, you'd expect consumption to follow income. If you earn less, you spend less. It's common sense. But here, we're seeing rural households spending significantly more, particularly on non-essential items.
So lifestyle goods, aspirational products.
That's the interpretation. It seems to be driven by aspiration. They may be earning less right now, but they are confident enough about the future that they are willing to spend, perhaps even take on debt, to upgrade their lifestyle today.
So the urban consumer, who might be more financially stable on paper, is worried about the future and saving money.
While the rural consumer is driving consumption beyond just the essentials, it completely flips that traditional narrative that the big cities are the primary engine of consumption in the country.
That's a fascinating insight. It suggests that if you're a business, you ignore the rural market at your peril. That's where the optimism is.
It's a critical signal.
Okay, let's move on to the science section. We have a tribute here to a truly remarkable figure, Reverend Dr. Leo D'Souza.
The Jesuit pioneer of the test tube cashew tree. This is just a wonderful story about the intersection of, deep scientific research and profound social commitment.
So Father Leo was a Jesuit priest, but he was also a highly trained scientist. He worked at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, one of the top research centers in the world. And his life's work was dedicated to the cashew nut.
It was. But it was never just about the nut itself. The motivation was social. In Mangalore, he saw that the entire cashew industry was built on the backs of poor, often illiterate women laborers who were paid very little. His goal was to use science to create high-yielding, disease-resistant cashew varieties to directly improve their income and their lives.
But he ran into a major biological roadblock.
He did. The article describes the cashew as being recalcitrant.
A stubborn plant.
Extremely stubborn when it comes to cloning. When you try to grow a cashew plant from a small piece of tissue in a test tube, a process called tissue culture, the cells release these things called phenolic compounds.
Bad.
It's lethal. They essentially poison themselves. The cells excrete this brown gunk, and then they just die. It's a cellular self-destruct mechanism that made cloning cashews seem impossible.
And he spent a decade trying to solve this.
10 years. He and his student, ICD Silva, just kept experimenting. And they finally cracked the code in 1994. They became the first people in the world to develop a test tube cashew tree that could be successfully transferred to soil and grow. It was a massive breakthrough.
I love the anecdote in the article about his time in Germany at the Max Planck Institute. People staring at his clerical collar in the lab.
Yes, they just couldn't compute what a Catholic priest was doing in a high-level molecular biology lab. And his response was apparently to just quote Gregor Mendel, the father of modern genetics, who was also an Augustinian friar.
For him, there was no contradiction.
None at all. Science was a tool for service. He used his position to push for women to be admitted to the historically all-boys St. Aloysius College. He ran a home for abandoned and traumatized boys. His work showed that you could do international quality research in a small college lab far from the big funding centers if you had the right motivation.
A true inspiration.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
staying in science but jumping much, much further back in time. We have an article here about dinosaurs and artificial intelligence.
Neural tracking. This is a great example of using new tech to solve a very old, very human problem in science. Subjectivity.
The problem being that identifying dinosaur footprints is really hard.
It's incredibly difficult and often subjective.
Mhm.
A footprint can look totally different depending on how wet the mud was, how fast the animal was moving, millions of years of erosion. You could have two world-class paleontologists look at the exact same track and come to two different conclusions about what species made it.
So they brought in an AI to be the impartial judge.
Pretty much. They developed a new AI method. They trained it on a data set of almost 2,000 silhouettes of known footprints. The AI doesn't just look at the overall shape. It analyzes 8 very specific geometric features: the spread of the toes, the way the heel was loaded, the angles between the digits. It takes the guesswork and human bias out of the equation.
And in the process of doing this, the AI found something unexpected.
It found something very weird: the bird discovery. The algorithm analyzed a set of tracks from South Africa that are dated to be 210 million years old, and its objective analysis classified them as bird-like.
What's the problem with that?
The problem is, according to the fossil record, the earliest known birds, like Archaeopteryx, aren't supposed to have evolved for another 60 million years after these tracks were made.
So the AI found an anomaly that human experts had maybe overlooked or interpreted differently.
Exactly. And it presents us with two incredible possibilities. Either one, birds or their direct ancestors evolved far, far earlier than we have any fossil evidence for, or two, there was a group of dinosaurs roaming around 210 million years ago that had, through convergent evolution, developed feet that were almost indistinguishable from modern birds. Either way, the AI didn't just categorize things, it forced us to challenge our established timeline of evolution.
I love that. The machine pushing us to rethink natural history. Okay, let's head over to the text and context section. First up, the Kerala RRTS.
This is a deep dive into the proposal for a regional rapid transit system in Kerala. It's essentially the successor to the highly controversial Silver Line project.
Right, the Silver Line project faced massive public protests. What makes this new RRTS proposal different? It's largely about the engineering, isn't it?
That is the single biggest difference, and it's crucial. The Silver Line was planned to be built largely on ground-level embankments, so you'd essentially be building a giant wall of earth running the length of the state.
In a state that's extremely prone to flooding.
Exactly. People were terrified that these embankments would block the natural flow of water, worsen floods, and literally divide communities in half. The RTS, on the other hand, is proposed as an elevated corridor.
So it's built up on pillars?
On viaducts, yes. This has two huge advantages. One, it drastically reduces the amount of land you need to acquire, which was a major source of conflict with Silver Line. And two, it allows water and local traffic to flow freely underneath, which addresses that huge environmental anxiety.
And it's also planned to be better integrated.
Much better. It's a multi-modal vision. It's still a high-speed corridor connecting Thiruvananthapuram in the south to Kasaragod in the north, with speeds up to 180 kilometers per hour. But crucially, the plan includes direct links to the state's airports and to the existing metro lines in cities like Kochi and Kozhikode.
And it's modeled on the Delhi-Erode system.
Which is a very important point. That system is already up and running. The technology is tested and proven. The funding model is also laid out 20% from the state, 20% from the center, and the remaining 60% from loans. Feels like a much more pragmatic and socially conscious attempt to build high-speed rail.
Next, in text and context, we have a piece on the Form 7 controversy. This gets into the real nuts and bolts of our democracy.
It really does. Right now, there's a special intensive revision of the electoral rolls happening across the country. Form 7 is the official tool for this. It's the form you fill out to object to a name being on the voter list.
For legitimate reasons, like if someone has passed away or moved to a different constituency.
Correct. But the controversy is around the alleged misuse of this form, specifically through bulk applications.
So people filing thousands of these forms at once.
Exactly. The allegation is that political operatives are filing huge numbers of anonymous or poorly sourced Form 7s to try and get eligible voters, presumably those who support their opponents, deleted from the electoral rolls.
And the scale mentioned in the article is just staggering.
It's 6.5 crore. 6.5 crore electors have been removed from the draft rolls across 9 states and 3 union territories. The highest numbers are in Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Gujarat.
Now, to be fair, the Election Commission has safeguards for this, right?
In theory, yes. There's a crucial safeguard. A booth-level officer, or BLO, is supposed to conduct a physical verification for every single Form 7 objection. They have to visit the person's house, talk to neighbors, and confirm the reason for deletion before any name is struck off.
But the concern is whether that process is actually being followed when you're dealing with millions of these forms.
That's the core of the concern. Critics fear that if this verification process isn't followed rigorously, especially against anonymous bulk complaints, it could lead to the disenfranchisement of a huge number of genuine voters, particularly from marginalized communities.
A serious issue to watch. Finally, for our last piece, we end with something a bit more cosmic. The extraordinary roller coaster of celestial travel.
A wonderful perspective-shifting article to end on. It's a physics lesson, really. It starts by just reminding us of a fact we all know but never really think about. Even when you are sitting perfectly still, you are hurtling through space at an unbelievable speed.
The numbers are just mind-bending. The Earth travels about 1 billion kilometers every year in its orbit around the sun.
It's almost impossible to comprehend. I loved the analogy the author used. If you were in a car driving nonstop at 100 kilometers per hour, it would take you 1,000 years to cover the same distance the Earth travels in just 1 year.
Our speed is about 107,000 kilometers per hour.
Just incredible. And the article also touches on this old scientific idea of the ether. For centuries, scientists couldn't imagine how light waves or gravity could travel through empty space. They thought space must be filled with some kind of invisible, frictionless fluid they called the ether.
But then the famous Michelson-Morley experiment in 1887 proved them wrong.
It proved space is a vacuum. We are flying through absolutely nothing. There's no wind in our face, and that's the reason we don't feel this incredible speed. There's no friction, no resistance.
The article gives a nice nod to the astrophysicist Professor Jayant Narlikar for his work in dispelling superstitions and promoting a scientific worldview.
It does, and it ends with this lovely thought. It calls all of us astronauts. No matter how mundane or ordinary your day feels, you are a passenger on this giant rock surviving a billion-kilometer journey through the void every single year.
It certainly makes you think twice about complaining about the traffic on your daily commute.
It definitely puts things in perspective.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.